Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Create a Life You Love, the podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy, and in this episode, my guest is Giovanni. Giovanni is the founder of Elemental Rhythm and Elemental Wellness, and he's also the co-founder of the Personal Development School. Now, Gio's going to be taking us on a bit of a journey through his life and all the transformations that he's been through. Throughout this conversation, we're going to be talking about many different topics, such as what it means to truly be happy and the correlation between happiness and success, emphasizing on the fact that financial success doesn't necessarily mean happiness. Some of the other topics that we're going to be diving into are the importance of living in the present and really finding fulfillment in our current experiences. From there, we're going to be talking about different tools and practices that you can really utilize to navigate the difficult and challenging times in your life. The last part of the conversation, we get into why we created this podcast and this program, Create a Life You Love. So with all that being said, here's my conversation with Giovanni.
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey, like as a serial entrepreneur growing up and, really chasing money. As I had a belief that, success, happiness, net worth, and self-worth were kind of connected in a big way. And that was just based on, just upbringing, what I saw around me, the different role models, people in my life. And, it's always, about status and, how well you're doing and you need money and blah, 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 all that stuff. And so, I spent a lot of my life just trying to do that and really not knowing at the time, but looking back is like how much running in circles, how much stress, how much confusion and complexity I was bringing to my life, chasing money. And at a certain point, I started realizing as I started to make a little bit of money, that I wasn't feeling any different. I was able to do more things for sure, but wasn't feeling any different. And one day I kind of had this vision. I was sitting at the edge of my bed and looking at my hands, and I saw these old hands. They remind me of like my grandfather's hands. Like I had this vision of like these old wrinkly hands. And what I started thinking about, or the thoughts that were coming into my mind was, like, yeah, you figured out a way to live a pretty comfortable life, to not work too much, to make decent amount of money, go on a couple vacations a year, you got a nice car in the driveway, like, you've accomplished all the things you've set out to, or on the way to do that. Um, but this vision of just getting old and going to this very repetitive life that was very meaningless. And you're gonna get there, and then when you get there, like, who cares? What's the point? And that's the first time I really started noticing the feeling of unfulfillment. And once I noticed it, everything I was doing felt more and more unfulfilling. Like, why am I in this business? Why am I in that business? I was doing things like construction or sales or in the food business, and it just felt so meaningless. And that kind of spurred me on this kind of another journey of self-awareness and awakening. I had a few other instances in my life where I had woken up to certain things. But this one was more about me and the way I felt, and not so much the external world. And so I started searching, and it led me to plant medicine. I went to Brazil in 2013. Um, First person I knew that was into ayahuasca. No one in my community or my family had heard about it. Everyone thought I was completely crazy. Had a huge kind of um, awakening experience there. Humbling in many ways, just showing like, hey man, you think you're so smart and got to figure it all out. You don't really know anything about anything. And so I came back and was really like, okay, I need to make some changes. Didn't know what that meant. Didn't know where to start. Just felt like I wasn't doing what I was supposed to be doing. And I kept searching. I kept reading things, trying to find people who thought differently or were, had information that might be able to help me understand um, my purpose or just have more meaning. So read things like Eastern philosophy. I was already kind of into that stuff when I kind of found out about ayahuasca, but just diving a little bit deeper in, and started a podcast. One of the guests was someone I just stumbled across, a guy named Wim Hof. Started watching a bunch of his videos and was like, hey, I got to meet this guy. So I reached out to him, was able to have a podcast with him. I would say, we became friends. We kind of hit it off there, and he invited me to do some trainings with him. And so I did the trainings. And at the facilitator final training in Colorado, was a week. We were surrounded by a bunch of very inspiring people from all over North America, some international. And we were jumping in frozen lakes and doing a lot of breath work. And I hadn't really taken breath work seriously. But in that moment, there's a sharing circle where everyone was sharing like their experience and how much they had transformed as they started doing more and more breath work and spending more time in nature. And by the time it got around to me to share, I was like, honestly, I didn't really know why I was there. It was cool to be invited by Wim, and I was there for the experience. And I thought it'd be awesome to get a picture for, my Instagram. Maybe I get some followers, all these crazy, like silly things. But towards the end of the week, he led us on a deeper breathwork journey where he was just like, okay, like we're just gonna go for it, surrender and let go. And he was playing like a drum. And I just kept breathing and breathing and breathing. And eventually I had this like out of body experience where I kind of left my body. It felt like I was floating around the top of the room, looking back down at myself. And I was like, what the heck's going on? Like I'd done ayahuasca, but this was something totally different, this experience. It was so clear and visceral and kind of scary at the same time. And as I felt the fear come into my body, I kind of like snapped back into my actual body and like felt like I was reborn. And I just felt this urge to cry. And the ego was like, there's a lot of guys and, intimidating people here. Like, do you really want to cry? And that thought was like a split second where I just like let go, just like started crying uncontrollably. And it felt so good. It felt like it was all these years of this pressure I put on myself to succeed, to be successful, to like make something of myself, but in the wrong way, like to try to be someone who wasn't me, like be the person that everyone else wants me to be, like my parents, my community, in business, try to like always just like not being myself. And when I left that weekend, I kind of came back and was just like curious about that experience. I'd never experienced anything like that. And so I started trying to learn. And back then, 2016 in Toronto, like there weren't many breathwork facilities that I knew. There's a couple, they're few and far between, but I was just reaching out to anyone who could teach me, who I could try and experience with. And around the same time, I started also going to Rhythmia in Costa Rica, 2017. But during that kind of like span of a year, I was just really diving deep into my own breathwork practice. And what I found was using, the rhythm of the music, I would get into these really open spaces where I could guide myself and use like gratitude meditation or different things. And it was like every time I would do it, I was getting these downloads, like try this, try that. And this kind of process kind of unfolded where I started getting myself back into that space I'd experienced at the Wim Hof Retreat. And I was teaching Wim Hof workshops here and there and breath work. And I started sharing this process, which didn't really have a name at the time, with friends and family. And they were having these really deep experiences and getting to their own place of emotional release, deep insight, flow state, you name it. And so I started having a weekly class, which quickly started filling up, and then there's a waiting list. And around the same time, I opened Elemental Wellness in 2018. And at one point, 2017, it was like you need a space. And in high school, we had like a space where my band used to play, and we jam and hang out there. But it was like a space like that, but for people who are searching, who are looking for community, where I was when I came back from my ayahuasca experience in 2013, like a space that could help people. And I knew it couldn't just be a hangout space. There had to be a business attached to it. So I created this wellness center, had float machines, cryotherapy, colon hydrotherapy, just whatever I thought. It was really too early for the area I was in, for the space. And I just thought it was gonna be this mecca of like all these services. And that's a whole other conversation that brought me, to a very, dark night of the soul where I had to accept, failure, business failure and what judgment. And like it really brought me to like letting go of this fear of failure and what other people think about me, which was awakening in itself. And looking back, it was super powerful because I thought I'd fucked up. I don't know if we can swear on this podcast. I thought I'd totally messed up and I had like a bank loan and all my personal savings were in it. And it just really brought me to this deep place of fear where I started like smoking cigarettes and drinking wine every night just to kind of like calm my nervous system. And, because construction's going on. And I was just like a mess. And by the time we opened, I was burnt out, uh, running out of money. And now I had to figure out how to run an in-person retail business, operations, hire staff. I had no experience doing any of this stuff. And so like it was really, really hard. And a few months in, it wasn't busy as I thought it was going to be. It's like, yeah, I'm going to open this place and everyone's just going to come. And little, to my ignorance, I realized like, hey, like it doesn't work like that. But there's a turning point where I just said like, like I accept if I fail, it's fine. Like I started thinking about like what I was actually afraid of. And I tried to really pinpoint who I was afraid of judging me, like who exactly am I worried about? And I couldn't think of anyone really. Like there was like a handful of people, maybe from like high school, who might laugh at me, but I didn't care about these. I barely even talked to them. And I knew that all the people who really loved me and knew who I was would support me through it, no matter what. And I said, okay, like every single person that walks through this door, I'm just gonna try to help them whichever way I can. And you know what I mean? And like I'll do it until I can't do it anymore, until like run out of money or it fails. But from that point on, like the energy shifted in the place. New people started coming in. Some staff quit, new staff came in, and it started kind of sustaining itself. And the classes were busy, and we had like this like waiting list for my classes, and people were getting a lot out of it. And many relationships and new businesses came out of that place. The place itself was never really profitable, but always kind of broke even. Always had enough money to kind of like pay the staff, and I had to put money in very rarely, but it survived. And then COVID hit. And when COVID hit, we were just kind of like getting to that point where we were about to make some money, and then we got shut down. I was just like, geez, man, what the hell is going on? And when that happened, a lot of people from the community and the staff were okay, like, you got to teach us how to do this now. You got to teach us how to do breath work. And I never thought about breath work as like an actual business. I never thought of it, it was just something that I was offering. It was also my thing that I'd created, and I was kind of proud of it. And they started asking me, and like, I was like, okay, let me think about it. And there's a little bit of fear about like, can I even teach this? I'm not really a teacher, which I found out now. My human design says I was meant to teach, but at the time I kind of didn't believe it so much. And the bigger thing was like, well, this is your thing. If you start sharing with everyone, it's not going to be your thing anymore. This what makes you unique. Your competitive advantage from the business world. It was like this unique thing that I had. And so that night I kind of like sat with it, and very quickly the answer was obvious. Like, hey man, if your mission is to help as many people as possible, like you need to teach people, you need to share, you need to like give this away and like allow it to do its thing. It's not about you. And so I agreed, okay, let's try. And we did our first training. And kind of what happened next was like kind of shocked me, because all of these people I was training, it was like a group of like six, I think six of the staff or a few people in the community. As they were practicing, they were coming back and sharing with me these experiences they were having with their family, with their dad, with their kids, with their best friend. And they were sharing how deep of a connection they were creating, how they were able to have a conversation with their family that was always under the surface and never had before, able to share these things. And as they were sharing with me, I could feel this resonance within them that was giving me that same feeling I would get when I was facilitating with someone else. And it was just such a powerful affirmation, like, yeah, this is what you're supposed to be doing. And so from there, it was like the only business that I ever kind of did that I never really had to try to make it happen, to force it, to come up with a plan. It just organically started unfolding from there, where, you know, people were asking for things and we were giving them. More people wanted to get trained, and trainings would just kind of fill up. As many people were supposed to be there were there. And it just organically evolved. I think now at the time of this recording, we probably have like 250 facilitators around the world, sharing these crazy experiences of like transformation. And it's just like the most fulfilling, meaningful thing I've ever been a part of. And I say been a part of because, yeah, like I founded it, I guess, but like it's such an amazing kind of like co-creation of what's happening right now, and like the feedback I'm getting and people wanting to make it better and to add to it and to help support. And it's just been such a beautiful journey. Um, and now I'm kind of at a space with the physical location where, over COVID, I kind of abandoned it for a bit, and now coming back, it's like, okay, like this space is needed now more than ever. I'm really trying to like attract in the right support system, because like, my ego has to accept like, hey, like I'm not a great operator. I'm not good at marketing and all these kind of things. Like, what are my strengths? It's like communication, sharing, teaching, creating like these experiences. And like, how do I really hone that in and bring in the people who want to be a part of this, that can really help me in those areas where I'm not so good at, perfect segue to how we kind of met, where,
Right.
like you were kind of looking for something more meaningful work wise and wanted to, contribute. And you had, I think, taken the level 1 training at that time. And, like your skill set was a perfect complement to what all the things that I kind of like needed help with. And we've seen so many amazing improvements since you've come on board. And um, we see how things are evolving and expanding now. And so like just really trying to trust into that and allow it to become whatever it needs to be, like just really like trying not to really make it something like, it is a business. So we're trying to be smart about how we kind of grow it, but not trying to force it, not trying to like make it be allow it to be what it needs to be. And
Right.
so that's kind of my story in a nutshell, and how we got to where we are today.
Yeah, amazing, man. You definitely summed it up really, really nicely. It was easy to follow. And it sounds like you, like growing up, when you look back on it, you took the path that you were kind of presented, right? As going to school, creating a business, trying to get the money, the house, the cars, like everything you kind of outlined. What was kind of like, when you look back at those years and kind of the trajectory you were on, like what was the biggest lesson that you think you learned from those experiences, and how did that chapter of your life, do you feel like, set you up for where you're at now?
Well, there were so many like business failures and partnerships and making money here, losing money there. And, um, so there's so many learnings about experience in the real world, experience with people, about business, about myself, about the way I did certain things. Like there's so many which reveal so many of my own insecurities and core beliefs about myself and why I did certain things. And each one was meaningful in its own way, to get me to where I am now. Like it all had to happen the way it did.
Right.
So it's hard to say like what stood out, but like when you really reflect on it, everything that's happened to me for a reason. There's a
Yeah.
lesson in every single thing, and a learning in every single thing, and an awareness in every single thing. If you wish to kind of bring your awareness to it, for a long time, I was like, oh, I learned a lesson from that. And it was like mental. It's like, oh, I learned about this, learned about that. There's also like an emotional kind of wound in everything, or something that kind of weighed on me that I had to kind of go back and kind of nurture myself and just be like, okay, like, like there was these hard times that you went through, and it had purpose, but not to discredit that, and to kind of like go back and heal myself or be compassionate towards myself, and nurture myself in those situations. Um, like my dad wanted to be an accountant, and I was going that path, but then something inside of me was just really like, no, this is not for you. And as I start to listen to more and more of that guidance, I start to realize like, hey, like there's something inside of me that's actually trying to guide me. And now I try to step more, and it's hard because like, I have this big kind of, what I just realized recently is like, one of my core wounds is fear of being alone, which ties a lot into this fear of letting people down. That if I let someone down, they're not gonna like me anymore, not gonna be my friend, blah blah blah. Because I was a bit lonely growing up. Like my brother was 5 years younger than me, and so by the time I was able to play with him for like 8 or 9, go to a few different schools, not having an older brother, bullies and stuff like that. Like I wasn't really bullied, but always kind of like fear, wanting to be accepted, wanting to be a part of something. And so I carry that till now, like 40 years later, like I'm still kind of carrying that. But I know it's like, if I'm doing it for the wrong reason, that's not alignment with who I am, it's not the best for anyone. You know what I mean? So like just going through with something, not wanting to say no, saying yes to everything. And I bring all this complexity into my life, which kind of stresses me out and robs my energy, and just really is like not good for me. And so I'm starting to be more and more aware of that, and how that kind of plays into everyday life. But when you say about the learnings, is like, yeah, the more I contemplate and bring awareness to it, I can see more patterns that show up, and they're helping me now to kind of navigate, decisions that I make now, if that
So
makes sense.
yeah, it totally does. And it's interesting because like your need to be accepted and not wanting people, I guess, not to like you in a sense, like kind of transformed it into you creating this like community for other people to be accepted, and for other people, like through breath work, to go help other people, right? So they can
Mhm.
release their emotions and their trauma, whatever that kind of looks like. But then it's like a trickle effect. So you're, the things that you went through, your limiting beliefs or your blocks, all that kind of stuff when you were younger, kind of transformed now into creating this amazing community for other people.
Yeah, and like the skills you pick up, you kind of can keep them for life, but it's how you use them, right? Like this ability to network and create community and connections. Like it's not like it's a bad thing, even though maybe at one time it was a need that was like looking for like survivors to feel a certain way. But now it doesn't come so much from a fear, it comes more from like, hey, like I can do this in a way that feels good to me, for the right reason, with the right intentions.
It definitely feels like, after speaking to quite a few people about this, it's a common like experience that people are going through. It's like they went through all this stuff when they were younger, and some traumas worse than others and stuff, but all these things that they went through, they kind of had to go through that so they could feel what it was like to be on the other end, and then they could then utilize that in their own life to help other people. Seems to be a
Mhm.
very common thing. And maybe your experience with ayahuasca and then working with Wim Hof and then continuing kind of working on yourself and using these modalities helped you have that awareness to realize that. But I wonder how many other people, like when they're younger, like they go through these experiences, but are not aware of it. And if they were more aware of it, they could dial it in a little bit more and maybe go on the path that, to find their purpose.
Yeah, like I wish I knew the things I know now earlier, but I think it just unfolds at the right time for everyone, and eventually if you get pushed enough into one direction, you're either gonna have a breaking point and like give up or go into depression or like choose to like, okay, like I need to transform or change something.
But
And like
you took the initiative. So kind of what I'm saying, a lot of people I think are not taking the initiative, right? Like they have this calling or this feeling, but they block it off and they stay on that same path till, like you're
well,
saying, till they get depressed or till
it's usually
something.
based on fear, right? Like there's a fear of change and like the ego loves certainty, and the ego loves certainty because it'll stay in something that's uncomfortable. It'll stay in something that's even very hard because it's certain to just deal with it, because the uncertainty, the unknown is like it's like a huge, like the ego can't go there because it doesn't want to, and that's why a lot of people have a hard time surrendering in ayahuasca, because like they'd rather stay in this kind of fear and like block where it's like, hey, if I just let go, I don't know what's going to happen. But when they finally allow themselves to, they get shown like something really beautiful that they can break through their reality, because what's beyond your current level of consciousness, you have no idea. So they'd rather stay in here than kind of like expand. um but like I was just kind of feeling, I was always a bit adventurous, and like I'm grateful that I did, but I think it was the perfect timing. And I would never, like in retrospect, every hard experience I was going through in that moment, I would have done anything to go back 6 months and not let it happen, or to go back to before, make a different decision. But when I look back now, it's like, thank God I had all those experiences. Who knows where I'd be right now? It wouldn't have led me to where I am in this moment.
Well, exactly. So what was the moment where you decided to go and, I guess in your case, work with ayahuasca?
It was just this very synchronistic kind of unfolding where I was just searching for answers. I was watching
Right.
YouTube videos and Buddhist philosophy and whatever I can get my hands on. Like I was reading the Bhagavad Gita, Stoicism, New Age,
Were you at a place though where you were feeling lost or stuck?
that's
Like,
where it started. It was like I didn't know what to do, and I was trying to find answers. I was trying to
right.
find answers. I was trying to get some clarity and some certainty, like something I can grasp onto. And in one of the videos I was watching, it was like it was Alan Watts, and he was like, "Yeah, if you think Alan Watts is interesting, Terrence McKenna will blow your mind." It was one comment out of hundreds that just popped out at me. It's like, "Oh, I've never heard of this guy. Let me Google him." Or YouTube search them, and then like, went into like hours of Terrence McKenna talking about plant medicine and psychedelics and ayahuasca, and something inside of me was just like
Interesting. You're
something
connected
called.
to.
And then it was just like the next weeks and months it was everywhere. It was just like calling me in, calling me. It's okay, like there's something here that I need to explore. Yeah.
No, that's interesting. How like how much do you feel like society and the way that we're kind of raised, and maybe from your parents or the school you go to or the community you're within, is an influence on people and the direction they're going at such a, especially at a
Oh,
young age?
100%. Like your subconscious mind is formed by like all of your experiences, what you see, what you hear, what's been said to you, what you experience. Some people it's like a specific event that kind of shapes their whole life. Some people it's just a lot of like this cultural kind of like environment of what you're hearing with social media, like religious community stuff, and all of these fears and beliefs get embedded in you. But I think the way this human experience is designed is perfect, because like all of these conditioning comes in, and then you're in this maze of trying to find yourself through all the conditioning that's not yours.
You think it's better to go through, those years where, you're kind of pushed
I
it, not
don't,
pushed, you're just kind of directed a certain way? Or do you think at a younger age, like if we're integrating, this mindfulness practice, if you will, into children at a younger age, do you not think that maybe they can find their path a little bit sooner and avoid having to go through some of those hardships? Or do you think it's worthwhile sometimes to
like
go?
I think for sure the more support and community and all this kind of stuff doesn't mean people are still not going to have their experiences. I think like everything's relative to the life that you live and to your mindset. So I absolutely think like, yes, we need more support and awareness, but not in a dogmatic way where it's like, hey, you have to do this, you have to meditate. It's more of like teaching them how to like tap into their own genius, their own intuition, and
Right.
let to
Yes.
guide and create an environment that that's okay to do. Like no one ever talks about that with kids. And, especially nowadays, like the environment, everyone's trying to grab people's attention, to control them, to make them into consumers. Like the capitalistic world is consuming itself, and we see where humanity is going as a whole. you know and how do we kind of pivot from that and create a world that's based in harmony, based on equality, based on community, that's better for everyone and not just for a few that are able to figure out this system and manipulate it and take advantage of it. So I think now more than ever, like I think, yeah, we need that. But I think overall, like the human experience is designed in a way that's so perfect, that's happening exactly the way it has to for, I think, humanity to evolve. Because I don't think with if you took away all the evil and all the things that we're perceived as bad, what would be challenging us to kind of change, to be better, to grow? You know what I mean? Like I don't think nature's designed like that. Um, it's perfect harmony, but what's pushing evolution is the challenges, right? To
Right.
continue to evolve and to continue to grow. Um, and like, yeah, a perfect world, like it would be completely perfect. And I think that's what we're trying to evolve towards. And maybe it might not even look like this. Maybe it's like in another life or another dimension, like who knows? And I think part of the mystery is like we don't know. And I think that's what makes it so unique and special. It's like we don't know how we got here. I don't know where I was before I was born. I don't know why we're even here in the first place or what our purpose is. Like it's so unclear. And we're just trying to figure things out, like business and money and life. And we
Yeah.
create all these things to occupy ourselves because we don't really know why we're here. No one does. But if I just sum it up, what I think is like this in 3D environment is created as like a learning ground for our spiritual body to come and to have challenges and to navigate through it and to evolve spiritually. And whether that's associated with a religion or not, I don't think it really matters because um, it's that truth underneath that we can all relate to. That it's kind of all religions kind of have these kind of core truths about um, being in more alignment with nature and being in accordance with your true self and these natural laws of balance and equality and morals and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so I think it's designed perfectly.
That's why I think, going back to my point, is like if we can integrate this kind of information into people at a younger age, I don't think it's not gonna avoid people going through certain types of
No.
experiences, but at least it could set them up to understand how to deal with certain experiences at a younger age that can maybe help them evolve a little bit earlier in life. Because it seems like most people, not most people, but a lot of people, you go through your years as a child, you go through young adulthood, a teenager, all that kind of stuff, and then you get to a certain point in your life and you realize, like, wait a second here, I've been kind of directed in directions maybe I don't want to go. And the next thing you know, you're in your 30s, maybe 40s, and then you kind of have this realization, right, where it's like, okay, maybe I have to reflect on myself, see where I actually want to go with my life.
Yeah, and yeah, I think the more awareness, the better, and the more awareness we can create a better world for everyone. And I think if I was in a position of someone who had the influence to control the world, and there's a lot of them out there, I'm afraid of losing that control, and I want to maintain it at all costs, and I want my family to pass that down. And so, if I can make people into zombies that are unaware, that are just kind of robots, I have the best chance of doing that. So more aware society that are more open-hearted, inclusive, and want to kind of create something that is very balanced and community based and supportive of everyone. That would kind of like be a threat to someone who's trying to maintain control and doesn't want anyone to kind of challenge giving that up. But I think that's a fear that they have as well. And I also think it's possible for them to shift and to kind of see like, hey, like maybe this is not the best. So,
Yeah.
that's
That's
my
kind of
hope
what
and
you did,
prayer.
kind of what you created, actually. I mean, through elemental wellness and then elemental rhythm, like that trajectory is kind of what you've put out there.
Yeah, it's an intention, that hopefully will create impact. but yeah, that's all that we can do is like do our best to kind of create an impact where we can or in the communities around us. And hopefully that kind of spreads and evolves and grows and creates a bigger impact around the world.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that's what's happening right now. Even like if we just focus on breath work alone, like using breath work as a tool, right, to handle all these emotional experiences that that you go through, it's very profound. It's very rewarding. And
Mhm.
again, like the more people we can, reach, and allow them to go through these experiences, I think it'll have that trickle effect. Because like kids are one thing, but if we can change the trajectory of an adult, right, and allow them to see certain things about themselves, then they can pass that on, hopefully, to their children.
And break patterns. And there's a lot of
Right.
patterns that have been carried down for generations through fear, through all these things that are also embedded in our DNA. You know, like I believe our DNA is like this register of everything that's happened to everyone in that has been kind of passed down from all these different generations that come to you, and you have a unique opportunity to change that, with the people around you, with the people, your descendants, and even heal backwards in time, but everyone has that opportunity to create that change. And it's hard, because there's a lot of these things that are pushing you for survival, all these fears, all these things that are in your nervous system that are kind of like part of, I guess, your evolutionary design to survive. But I think the next evolution is going to be, a spiritual evolution and a consciousness evolution. And, through awareness, and what's happening on the planet right now, it's like this great duality of like things are moving like almost the opposite. But I think, you know, I hope that, we can bring it back into balance. And I think it has to get really far apart to kind of almost like recreate into something new.
So what's your intention now? Like, where you're at, you've created these businesses, and elemental wellness is still going, elemental rhythm is growing. What is your intention now? Like, what are you hoping that these kind of evolve into?
Like what I've realized just recently is that like what I really want in my life is simplicity.
Hmm.
And I realized that this serial entrepreneur in me created a lot of complexity,
Yeah.
a lot of complexity. And that I know that when things are simplified, I can create from like that purest, truest, most honest place. And I want to continue to create community and to create experiences and to create an environment for people to grow and to expand and to learn. But also like bring in the support and help to kind of do that in the right way where it doesn't all have to be on me, where the old entrepreneur was like, do everything, push it through, make it happen.
Right.
And so I'm just coming to like there's this constant evolution in my life through awareness. It's like, like, hey, more is definitely not better. Like I'm open to abundance for sure, however that presents itself, but it doesn't just mean money. Abundance is like experience, it's community, it's connections, it's experiences, it's being happy, it's having time, it's doing the things you want, where you give a lot of that up when you're an entrepreneur, where it's like work, 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 and always on the computer, always doing. And for a while, I was tricking myself. I was like, oh, I'm working so hard still, but I'm doing everything I love and it has impact and it's positive. But is that what I really, really want? Is that how I really want to spend all of my time until what? Like I'm 50, I'm 60, so my kids are fully grown. Like I want to experience in the now balance and allow that to kind of expand and still grow in the way it needs to be. But being more aware of that. And that's what I'm kind of like working on now in this life that I want to live, you
Do,
know.
do you feel like it's like still your past experiences are still integrated into how you're kind of showing up now? This notion of working hard, creating, having all these businesses and stuff like that. Do you feel like that's still
So my perspective on it is like, even though when you have the awareness, so your awareness has shifted. So like, for example, a trauma, you get into a car accident or something, someone does something violent to you. And now you have this emotional attachment to that. And you can never change the event from happening, but you can change your belief around it, the belief you create on yourself. Like I'm unsafe around cars, I'm unsafe with drivers who are not thing, I'm unsafe around men, I'm unsafe around, people that are in sports, like whatever it is that kind of happened to you. So if I can go back and change that experience, my belief about myself and experience, like, hey, actually, that one thing doesn't define me because it was one instance. It's not actually, there's not someone, the boogeyman around every corner. So that's changing the awareness. But when you start creating all these beliefs, you create all these protection mechanisms around you to protect you and create all these behavioral patterns. Those are much harder to drop because they're so ingrained in your neuroplasticity. So when you find these patterns coming up, you have to let yourself know, bring your present awareness, like, hey, like that's not true anymore. The opposite is actually true. I'm actually safe. I'm actually not under threat. I'm actually a good person, or I'm actually not alone, or I'm actually, not a failure, or I'm not going to let people down. And you really have to start working on reprogramming the belief system that was attached to, like all the patterns that were attached to your belief system. And that's a practice. And that's why we've created some of these mind work tracks and like these ongoing kind of support, it's daily breath work of like refocusing and building a new pattern in there. Like it's okay not to work all the time. It's okay to, this FOMO feeling is not real. Like I'm not missing out on anything. People are still gonna like me and love me if they don't see me all the time. And I'm just relating some of my own patterns where it's like, hey, like if you just communicate with people where you're at, they're not gonna feel let down. They're gonna actually respect you for that. And they're gonna try to figure out a way to make things work. A lot of that's related to business and like getting into things that I probably shouldn't and making commitments that I can't keep because I don't want to let them down. And then feeling all this pressure on myself to now deliver to all these different people, all these different things, all these different businesses. And so that's something like I'm still working on. People see me as like, oh, this guy's got it all together, he's got it figured out. But there's always different levels of awareness. So I'm checking in with like, hey, how am I feeling right now? Yeah, there's something that's bothering me. So I have to bring awareness. Like, what is that? What's the pattern? When do I feel this? Like, oh, okay, like these situations, there's something there. And eventually you can kind of pinpoint and say, okay, like I see exactly what it is now. Now I got to make a change.
Right. I
Mhm.
mean, the awareness factor definitely keeps coming up, and you definitely have a lot of awareness around these experiences and these things that have come up in your life.
Well, your
How does,
emotions is a GPS. So when you
Hmm,
feel something, it's trying to tell you something's out of alignment or there's something here you need to bring your awareness to.
right.
It's embedded in our system. It's just like this GPS. Like now to figure out where that comes from, that's kind of some of the work, some of the
Right.
contemplation,
So,
breath
so
work.
that, obviously for yourself, you're very in tune with this kind of stuff, and it makes sense. But for someone who is feeling these emotions or, going through these kind of situations and stuff, for them, it may not make sense to them. They may not even understand this concept that you're talking about. So what would you suggest to someone who is just kind of like recognizing, yeah, maybe I do need to make shifts? How do they become more aware, and how do they how become more, I guess, emotionally intelligent, if you will, so they can kind of have some of these breakthroughs that you've had?
Yeah, like I think the first thing is like there's nothing wrong with them. There's just something that's happening to them that doesn't feel comfortable. But they can change that, but they have to figure out where it's coming from. So stopping the feeling, numbing it out with drugs, alcohol, TV,
Right.
whatever it is not the answer because you're just pushing it down. So it's like having the courage to kind of explore your emotions, to bring some practices in that bring more awareness, whether it's breath work, plant medicine, meditation, just contemplation, journaling, to try to start to see because there's a map within you. The thing like intuition is trusting your gut feeling. If something's not good for you, okay, why do I feel so much resistance to this? Curiosity is a big one. Like follow what you're curious about, because that for me kind of opened a lot of doors when I started feeling this curiosity. Children have curiosity, but the curiosity is like kind of like tied into your intuition. It's like trying to like understand more, figure out something or experience something new. And then also check into your fears. Like a lot of your fears are not real. It's based on a belief of trying to protect yourself. And the things that you're most afraid of, there's probably something embedded in that can help you with the breakthrough. Um, so look for support, look for mentors, look for teachers, look for anything that your curiosity kind of leads you towards, because each one is going to be like a key to another door, like another awareness. Like there's never like one end all be all, like, oh, I'm gonna go do ayahuasca, it's gonna fix all my problems. No, like ayahuasca might open up 10 more doors for you. So you're gonna have a lot more questions to explore. But now
Yeah.
you're opening that up into a new path and experience, that's going to be specific to you. Right. And
Right.
if one person says they have all the answers for you and they know everything about you and how to fix it, just run the other way.
Right. No, I think you gave some great examples, and you're right. Like going and doing plant medicine or even a breathwork experience, usually it's going to open things up. It's the work you do after that that really is going to make sense. So I think it's a lot to do with also just being willing to step up and take responsibility for your life, and being like, look, like I'm in this certain place. Nobody's going to help shift me or save me. I have to be willing to do the work. It doesn't mean you can't reach out and get support like you're saying, but you got to be willing to face yourself and face who you become to really, be able to shift and make changes.
It's a combination. Like asking for support, but also committing to like doing the work. And whatever the work is, it's whatever you feel like you're ready for at that moment in time. Like just because I'm doing a certain thing doesn't mean you have to do that. It means find where you're at and just go beyond your comfort zone, go into the unknown a little bit, explore, and
Right.
go at your own pace. And I think one of the most important things throughout all this is to just be compassionate towards yourself. Oh, I'm so far behind this person, or I suck, or I'm not good enough, or I feel so all over the place. It's like, no, like that's not going to make it better. Be compassionate towards yourself. Like it's okay to be where you're at, to keep working through it, and you'll get through it. If you have the intention to change and to work through it, even if you don't know the pathway, if you just keep sticking with it, things will start to move and change.
Yeah, most definitely. I think one of my biggest lessons is learning that my journey is my own. And anytime that I'm feeling that, where I'm comparing to others, or I should be in this stage of my life, I always come back to that, because when you recognize that each of our journey is our own and we're on our own path, and the things that are showing up for us are for us, it changes your perspective, because we're all on this journey. And just because somebody is maybe more successful you financially or in their career, or maybe they have a family and you don't, it doesn't mean that you're doing something wrong. It just
Right.
means that you're on your own path.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of people need to accept that. And it goes back to like how we were brought up, and this notion of success and having all this money and all these things. But we're realizing too, as we get older, right? It doesn't actually mean happiness. It doesn't mean fulfillment. You could have the most successful business in the world and be extremely unfulfilled.
One thing I started realizing around the time where I kind of like broke out of my or started having the unfulfillment thing was like I saw a lot of people that were very successful that were miserable, that
Exactly.
didn't
Right.
talk to their brother, get divorced from their wife, have no friends, like all of these things. And it's like, okay, like, is that what I really want? No, like it's there's no correlation to happiness and success, or at least based on the conventional definition of it, like financial success and happiness. Some people are successful and happy, and other people are very unsuccessful and very happy, and I think it's way better to be happy than to be rich, like way better to be happy to be rich. So
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And also just living in the present. So much about what's going to happen then. It's like if you can live your life in the now, I feel like that you're going to get the most fulfillment out of. Like, how can I enjoy this experience that I'm going through right now and get the most out of it? And the other point that I think is really relevant is like now you have the tools, right? And the practices that you can tap into when things are going a little rocky, or you know what I mean? Like you're going a little off track. You can always utilize these tools to bring yourself back, and you know how to kind of like navigate through these rocky times that you might be going through.
mhm.
So I think it's all good. I think it's all amazing for me personally. Connecting with you and being part of Elemental Rhythm has really been a great catalyst for myself, my own growth. And now just to bring it kind of back is like, we've decided to create this podcast and this program called Create a Life You Love. And it's really great because it summarizes a lot of things that you talked about. Like what we're trying to create is just like an incubator, right? Or a container, if you will, for someone to come in and do that inner work. So you don't necessarily have to do this inner work alone either. Like you're feeling like you're in a place in your life and you know you need that shift and you have to do the work. There's other programs out there, but this is kind of one of the reasons why we wanted to create this, right? So people can come in, we can give them the tools and the practices and a safe place to do it, not just on their own, but with other people, right? And having that community behind you, having that support, I think is a huge, huge part of transformation. Because if you can have that support of other people that have been through this before, I think it can really kind of elevate you and make you feel like you're not alone. And a lot
Mhm.
of times I think we get stuck and like, oh, this happened to me. I feel so isolated and alone. But as soon as you open yourself up and start talking about it, you're like, oh, well, that guy's been through that. That girl's been through that. It's like, I'm not alone on this. We can go through this together. And I think that for me anyway, is a big part of why we've created this. And, maybe we can kind of conclude it with you just kind of sharing like, your intentions behind creating kind of a program like this.
Yeah, I think it's exactly that. It's I found like a lot of the experience is, and I think from the beginning of time is like that sense of community, that tribe that kind of supports you and helps lift you up where you don't feel alone. I think a lot of the ailments that we have is from like isolation and loneliness and feeling like different and not accepted. And I think the more people feel that, the more it's going to create this environment for them to continue to evolve, to feel not alone, to share, to learn from other people. And a lot of times we find like this sense of sharing and connection actually sparks more growth and gives more insight. And all of the experience I've gone through, whether it's ayahuasca or breath work, I think the most powerful part of it is this sense of community that kind of gets built. And we see it in our breathwork community for all the facilitators, like this sense of support and connection. And so I think like creating an online or in-person kind of container for this, like, listen, it's an idea right now that we have a lot of intention behind, and I think it's going to be amazing to kind of create that because we see how it works already. Um, and just to really bring us back into this like community space of connection and healing that humanity really, really needs right now. To find more things that we're similar on and alike on versus what makes us different, And I think there's a lot of intentional division that's being created in the world right now through propaganda and media to drive hate and fear and for control, like things I was talking about earlier. But the antidote to
Mm.
that is like creating more connection and connecting with people and seeing what we have similar and helping each other to kind of evolve and to become the best versions of ourselves.
Yeah, well said. I mean, just having a place where you can feel safe to be vulnerable and open up about what you've been through, I think that alone is just like a huge catalyst for transformation.
Hmm.
So, not amazing, Gio. Thank you for sharing your story and your path and your journey and everything that you kind of been through. If anyone wants to just kind of connect with you and learn more about you, how can they find you online?
Elementalrhythm.com, at elementalgeo, elemental rhythm on Instagram, anywhere you can find me, YouTube, wherever. uh,
Yeah.
should be a
Okay.
message. I'd love to connect.
Amazing. All right, guys. Well, that's about it. Thanks for listening, and I hope you guys got something out of this episode. And we will see you on the next one.